Welcome back or welcome to the Next Level Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris. And as always, we are brought to you by Apex Performance, the only leadership and performance development training in the security industry for security professionals by security professionals. As always, I'm excited to bring to you someone who's going to give you some frameworks, some methods, some knowledge, something that can help you grow and be better and take your game to the next level. But we're going to do it a little bit different this week. We have somebody who's outside of the industry who I've gotten to know a little bit, mostly over social media, but we have a lot of intertwines in our backgrounds and some mutual friends, and excited to bring this to my audience. So, Mark Dowdle, thank you for jumping on with me. I appreciate you taking the time, and welcome to the show.
It is good to be here, John. Thank you.
Awesome. So Mark and I have, again, some intertwined backgrounds. We both went to the University of St. Thomas. We both played football and lacrosse. I exited early my football career and went all in on lax, but you managed to do both, I believe, all the way through. And at a time when the football team was actually at some of its highest level of performance, and the lacrosse team at the highest level of performance. So that's, two fairly elite programs in their respective areas operating at the same time, which is pretty impressive. So tell me a little bit about, that part of it, being a two-sport college athlete, kind of like the challenges, the opportunities, and maybe how that set you up to the things that you're working on today.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, coming into college, I was super excited to have this well-balanced, social, academic, and athletic life. And I actually wasn't going to plan on playing lacrosse. I think maybe in the back of my mind, the seed was there. But Peter Coleman, who was a sports trainer, sports and medicine trainer for the football team, and Charlie Venable, who are two former Tommy lacrosse players, he was on the football team. And they found out that I played lacrosse just through conversation, and like every single day, they're like, "Dude, you gotta play, you gotta play." And what I learned from being able to play football, which was D3, high level, very buttoned up. Caruso's way is kind of like high and tight, structured system. And then lacrosse being club, still high level, but the difference of like having one day off a week for football because it was mandatory by the NCAA, and then going to club lacrosse where we're practicing 2, maybe 3 times a week. We're traveling to road games. It's a little bit more laid back, kind of like we're in it to win, but also having fun is a top priority. I think being able to, like, I would define myself as an athlete today as someone that likes to have a lot of fun, but do epic things. And I think coming out of college, having those experiences with lacrosse and football and competing at high levels and finding ways to balance like having a ton of fun and playing super well and hard. I think even just like thinking about it now, like that's probably the biggest thing that I've pulled from being an athlete at St. Thomas is like you can have fun, responsible fun, but you can have fun and also play at an extremely high level. You don't have to necessarily, give up one or the other.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I think, I've had the blessing of being a part of that program from 2002 or 3 when it was a complete shit show. And the whole league was, right. It wasn't just us, but it was a shadow of itself. And shout out to Pete Moosberger and Kevin Reed, who came in and the coaches at the time and really cleaned it up and built the foundation that then was carried on by Brian Gross and now by Jason King. Shout out to Jason King and the rest of the staff who are continuing that legacy. But I was able to go back and coach and be the defensive coordinator in the last couple of years, and I still connect with the team and work with them. And the coolest thing is to see the continuity of culture and excellence over almost 2 decades, right? It's like it's impressive because they've maintained that structure of competitive excellence and fun. And I think that's a real key to success is like, you can't stack 6 national championships. It doesn't matter what level you're on. You could be playing backyard bocce. You can't win as much as they do. 7-0 right now, top team in the nation. Again, no shocker, right? It's like the Jim Riley, who was a teammate and coach of mine, used to use this frame when every year he'd say, same gun, new bullets, right? It was just
Mm,
rinse and repeat. And so
mm,
I really think there's magic to that. And I took the same lessons out of it around like how you can push yourself in the right places. You don't have to give up enjoyment, right? And if you're not having fun, you got to question, am I doing the right stuff? So question for you, man. So you graduate. Did you jump right into running? Had you always been a runner? Like, for those who don't know, and this is how um kind of you and I got connected. I, followed you on Instagram. I think it's just like, hey, other Tommy players and I'm a runner and a lot of people I know run too. And so I started following you and you're, doing some really interesting long distance stuff and from Duluth down to the cities and just other things that are like wow that's that, and we'll get into some of the other things in a minute. But had you always been someone who liked to run? Was that something you picked up after college? What was that? How did that transition take place?
yeah. So really the first instance that I mean, I ran cross country in grade school, but I don't really lean on that as like an experience that led me into running. I remember very specifically on a weekend in Nashville. We were coming back from this is my senior year. We had just, lost 2 out of the 3 games in Nashville for lacrosse, one of which was Kennesaw State, which we had never lost to in program history. So we were pretty disappointed after that weekend. And, an 18-hour plus ride back gives you a lot to think about. And I remember my brother, older brother, he sent me the Goggins Joe Rogan podcast, where he's just talking about how he's doing 100 miles around a track. He's pissing blood. He's dehydrated, and then continues to run 30 miles. And I had never heard of ultra running. I had never like considered or even was aware that people like this existed. And I think it just met me at a good time of at the point where I was at in college, I was thinking a lot about the future. I had also had several disciplinary actions taken against me for things that I'd done. And I was at a big reflection and turning point where the world around me seemed like it was kind of like falling apart. And I was blaming other people.
Mm.
And this guy on this podcast, Goggins, was putting that mirror up to me and saying, it's your responsibility. You need to take ownership. And so the first thing I did when we got back at 3 in the morning was go out for a run because I wanted to be just like David Goggins. Um, and I think just like that led me into running. And then over we went through the spring season, we won the national championship, and then that confrontation with like, okay, I'm not an athlete anymore. I still want to stay in shape. This running thing I'd kind of picked up on, and then it just led me into, wow, I feel a lot less angry and lost coming out after a run. This like spiritual cleansing, and I just kind of enjoyed finding something that made me feel calm and centered and grounded. And I signed up for a marathon and then got into like, okay, I did a marathon, can I do a 50K, a 50 miler, the Goggins 4x4x48? And then it just kind of spiraled from there where I was like, okay, I want to do all these things that I've ticked off the box here. What's the next thing type of mentality?
I've been very, and thank you for sharing that because I mean there's some vulnerability there around going to a dark place and having some challenges around you and some adversity and really there's kind of two choices there. There's continuing to point outward
Yeah.
and blame and complain and say, wow, woe is me, and or take if you've listened to Goggins, I'm going to make a educated guess. You know who Jocko Willink is, and maybe even read his book Extreme Ownership. And that's, one of the, like, it's on me, right? I have to take ownership for this. And I've been very honest with my listeners and those that I work with around the similar experience that I had, right? When I stopped playing lacrosse, like I lived a pretty socially aggressive lifestyle at college. I don't know if I've ever talked about this publicly, but after my junior year, I actually lost my captainship for the lacrosse team due to too much partying and not holding up to the standard and not being a part of the best thing that ever happened to me. I had lunch with my former head coach a couple of weeks ago, and reiterated to him my thankfulness of him attempting to learn that lesson. It would take me a couple of years of reflection to realize what they were trying to do and the lesson that I learned, but it was the best thing that could have happened to me because I came back the next year, I doubled down my efforts, but I still partied probably more than I should. And I had a hard time transitioning into the real world, and I kept a lot of those bad habits. And then so when things weren't going my way and the plan wasn't happening, I mean, I was a barely functioning alcoholic. I was depressed. I was suicidal. I hit my rock bottom, and then I found running, and I've been very open that I think it saved my life. I signed up for my first marathon, and like the rest is history. And so I think like I really resonate with that story, Mark, because I lived it, right?
Yeah.
It's some people have said, you've become obsessed with like working out or running or discipline. Right now I'm doing 75 hard. I'm on day 31. It has nothing to do with working out. I work out 2 times almost every day. It
Right.
has to do with the intense discipline of doing the same thing day after day, aggressively um, managing and mastering the monotonous. And so I want to talk about that a little bit because running for long distances by yourself can get
Yeah.
lonely, boring. Like so like when you do that, when you go on these longer runs that you've been known to do, you've become accustomed to do, like how, like, to me it's super therapeutic. I do a lot of thinking. I sometimes listen to music, sometimes don't, podcasts, sometimes don't, kind of in and out. I like to just every morning I go for a run at least 45 minutes, and it just lets me like unpack my thoughts and think about the day. So
Yeah.
what is that like for you, and how do you feel about that experience of 3, 4, 5 hours of running with just you and your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first 3 years of running for me, I wouldn't listen to music podcasts or anything. I was very strict about that. And then started trying to make content around the running that I do. And so I'm bringing my phone and I'll say that it's crept in where it almost has like completely taken up the time that I've spent running. And it wasn't until this weekend I was up in Ely, Minnesota for the out of staters. It's way northern Minnesota, kind of on the border of the Boundary Waters in Canada, but you don't get phone service out there. And uh, I went for 3 runs where I had nothing but 3 hours of me and my thoughts in my alone time. And it reminded me of how much or how important that time was to just allow myself to get into my thought process, allow my creativity to run free. And just like, I don't know, we don't give ourselves enough time to sit in our thoughts. And I certainly was falling into that trap. What do I think though, ultimately about like spending that much time alone? It is probably my favorite part of the day and the year. Most people, when they take PTO, they'll go on vacation somewhere or they'll take a load off or go visit a city. For me, my PTO when I was working was what long run can I do and how many days do I have off where I can run every single run of those days. And I know you alluded to the Duluth run that I do. Kellen and I, who's one of the owners of Embrace North, he and I have now done this 2 years in a row where we run from Duluth, Minnesota, and then 160 miles over the course of 3 days back to the Twin Cities. And I told him last year, I was like, dude, if I could do this for a profession, or if I could do this just like every weekend, this would be the life, because it's an opportunity specifically that run, because we've done it so many times now, it has become an opportunity to step on the starting line and say, okay, who am I right now? Who have I been the 365 days leading up to this run since we did it last year? And then over the course of those 3 days, begin to like let go of the things that are no longer serving me and start to become more of aware of the things that I want to work on and grow. And I just like, I love that piece of running. I love that opportunity to check in with myself outside of like speed or distance or all the other metrics that people like to talk about, but like the internal metrics that you really can't measure unless you're tuned into yourself. So I love that time. I love being able to segment out time to just be by myself. But, you know, as I admitted, like I'm not always the best with it. More recently, as I'm trying to like post on social media.
Yeah, before we hit record, we talked a little bit about, running challenge that I did in January where I ran 100 miles, and part of that was posting every single morning, kind of like
Yeah.
that social accountability. And I've continued that. I post after a run, and sometimes like I'd say 90% of the time I'm up at 4:30, I'm out there at 5, I'm running, and it's on, my post is on LinkedIn by 6 a.m. Or 7 if I have to do something with my kids. Uh, but that like that I used to never run with my phone.
Yeah.
So I started running with my phone so I could post right when I was done, right?
Yeah.
And I have and like you'll love it because I'll link to your Instagram in the show notes, and I encourage people to go back and look in the winter months where your beard. I There was a day that I ran. It was negative 22 outside, wind chill. I don't even know what it was, and like like I got, because you and I are living in Minnesota. Not a lot of people that follow me are in Minnesota, so they're like, "You're crazy." I'm
Yeah.
like, first of
Yeah.
all, like you can do anything for. I went for a 2 mile run. You can do anything for 20 minutes,
Yes.
right?
100%.
So that's one thing, and I just proved to myself that I can run in negative 30, 40 degree, whatever it is, for 20 minutes. Like now that's like no
That's locked
excuses,
in
right?
there.
So
Yeah.
like you said, you start moving the boundary of what you're capable of and you have the opportunity to do that every time you go out for a run, like whatever that is, right? If you're like, I'm gonna try to do my fastest mile,
Mm.
and like I'm gonna just run as fast as I can, and that's what my challenge is today. I'm just out here to enjoy. There's a park by my house, like a nature preserve, that I love to run through, and you see coyotes and you see deer, and it's just like this natural experience, and they're not worried about you and you're not worried about them. And there's a picture you posted once, and I don't know if it was you or a running friend posted, of like two gray wolves walking
Mm.
across. I don't even remember what I'm talking about, but it
Yes,
was like
yes, yes, yeah.
they're
That
just
was
walking.
Matt Clevin up in
Oh
the
yeah, club, yeah. And it's just like things like that, right? Like
yeah,
things like that when you kind of just you go immerse yourself, and you refer to it as kind of like this cleansing, right? Of like,
yeah.
and that's why I love to run. I haven't been up to the Boundary Waters. That's a place I'd love to go to. I like to, like, whenever I travel, I the first thing I want to do is go for a run, and
Mm.
like almost like explore, but then like I almost feel like, I'm staking my territory of like
Mm.
I've conquered this area with a
Yeah.
run, and now it knows me and I know it. No, I love that. I think, it's there's something just so natural for running too. I mean, it's what it feels like. It's what humans are meant to do. It's in our DNA. It's part of our I think, just evolutionary process of move and run, and we're built to do it. And so when I hear people be like, "Oh, I could never run a marathon, or I could never run," it's like, you could. You're choosing not to. That's a
Yeah.
choice. Like anybody can do it, and anybody can get good at it. Um, so you've talked a little bit about some of these, runs that you've done. Now, we're closing in on the end point of something that you started, called Calendar Club.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. First define it, and then let's talk a little bit about what went into that decision. Why did you decide to embark on this adventure?
Yes. So Calendar Club is a running challenge that is semi well known in the running community, but it's when you run the number of miles equal to the day of the month. So today on March 20th, you run 20 miles. The next day on the 21st, you run 21 miles, then 22, all the way up until the 31st. And historically, it's, pretty well documented that people in the running community will just pick a month out of the year and take on that challenge. I know Jesse Itzler's done it. Des Linden has done it. A few other people, but when my journey started with it was back in April of 2020, after I had done the marathon, done the 50 miler, and I was looking for that next challenge. Connor, I'm forgetting his name, but Colin O'Brady, who's an adventure athlete, he had posted to his social media trying to get his community to do Calendar Club in the month of April. And so it was like, yeah, I'm looking for something to do. We're in COVID. There's no races. This is the thing that I want to put my mind to. And so that month of April 2020, I completed the challenge. I did the month. It was much more difficult than I thought it would be and nearly broke me. And one of my friends from college texted me the next day. And he was like, hey, congratulations. That was awesome. But you're kind of soft because you did a 30-day month instead of a 31-day month. And so, of course, I mean, the most dangerous words that a friend, someone that I can trust, can tell me is like, you won't do this, or good job, but you're kind of soft, because there's more you could have done. So, in the back of my mind, that seed was planted of like, okay, I got to do a 31-day month, or maybe I just step right into the next month right now and do it. And at the time, it didn't really fit what I was looking to do, but it marinated over 3 years. And during those 3 years, I turned to more team runs, charity runs, getting more of like a bigger purpose around the runs that I was doing, because at that time I was missing the team locker room environment that I was coming out of from football and lacrosse. And the Calendar Club was such a solo endeavor where I ran every mile alone. It was kind of like, it was just me out there for,
Yeah.
my own physical accomplishments. Um, but then after 3 years of doing Love Like Lori charity runs, and no more PTO days to really go through, I looked at the calendar, and this was a challenge that I could do while working a full-time job that didn't demand a full support team around. And so on May 1st, 2023, I set out to do Calendar Club every single day of every month for one full year. So instead of doing 1 month, I'm doing 12 months. And now we're looking at 41 days left in this challenge and over 5,500 miles ran.
And you looked off to your left there because there's a big ass calendar
Yeah.
that I know is right there with
Yep.
the sticky notes that you pull
Yep.
off each day. And
Yep.
so I mean, again, I mentioned this to you before we hit record that some of my audience and friends were like blown away by 100 miles in a month. And I responded to them like yes, it's not easy, but really it broke down to 3.5 to 3.8 miles per day, right? It's not a huge amount, and it was more about consistency and doing it every day and committing to it. And you've really kind of 100x that, right? And um not only that, but then in February, so I can imagine going back to the thought process of like the shit that goes through your mind as you're running huge miles. Uh, you know, there was this like fictitious fight with treadmills that took place in the month of maybe leading up into February, right? Like December, January, of like people. We're in Minnesota. I hate treadmills, so I'm right there with you. I would rather get frostbite than run on a treadmill. So I run outside. Like I have a friend of mine who would always say, and this he isn't the one who made this up, but he quotes it often. There's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad gear. And so I remember, I'm not from Minnesota. I grew up in Maryland, but when I first started becoming a runner, I started running in April.
Mm.
And I ran the Twin Cities Marathon in October, and I kept running. And then I realized if I'm going to keep running, I'm going to have to like figure out what to do in these 4 months that are coming ahead of
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, that was 2011. And so over the last, 13 years, I've acquired the right gear and the right stuff and the right mentality and capability to run through that weather. But at any rate, in February, you did something special. You after debating with people around you're like, I don't want to do treadmills are for suckers, we're not going to do that. And I think Terry Treadmill, the alter ego, the
yeah,
the uh,
yeah,
the villain, who was representing Big Treadmill and
yeah,
trying to lure you over to the dark side.
yeah.
You did outside and inside.
Yes.
You did every day equitable. So again, today's the 20th. You ran 20 miles outside and then 20 miles inside on the treadmill.
Yep.
So, like, again, was that one of those someone said, I bet you won't? Was that just something that popped in your head? Like, what was that for? Give us some context around that decision.
Yeah, there's a number of different, definitely part was like the you won't aspect. But the whole reason I started this calendar club journey to begin with is because I believe in doing hard things. People asked me, why are you doing this? Why are you taking on this challenge? And very simply, the answer is because I can,
Mm,
because I have an opportunity. And how else am I going to spend my free time after work? That type of thing. And I believe in doing challenges and doing hard things because I'm transformed in that process. And as one can imagine, after doing, I think at the time it was like 9 months of Calendar Club, it looks massive and I understand that, but you start to get in a rhythm and like I knew what to expect every month at that point. And, I had made this video calling out treadmill runners because I was running in the cold weather and I had a big frosty beard and I was sticking my face in the snow and just kind of calling treadmill runners soft in more of a playful, joking way, but also like being serious at the same time. And that got a lot of comments back from people just like feeling triggered by it or feeling like, you know, that I couldn't handle the treadmill, that I was afraid of the treadmill. And so, yeah, I created this alter ego of this treadmill runner called Tony. And then he would start commenting on my posts that would rile up treadmill runners. And, you know, I had this big stick against treadmills. And then the idea just came to me of like, what if to piss off treadmill runners even further and to like stay true to the original challenge that I had of putting myself in uncomfortable situations? What if I did a full month of Calendar Club outside and a full month of Calendar Club on the treadmill just to prove that one, I can do hard things, but two, your excuse for not going outside is not an excuse because I'm doing both now. And so it's this kind of double whammy of just wanting to put myself in a situation where it's like I want to prove myself. Like I want to prove to myself that I can do hard things, but I think what's hard for me to get across to people is the Calendar Club challenge, just as the January miles for meaning challenge for you, it's less about the miles that are difficult and more about the everyday consistency of it. Like there are days where I know you don't feel like running. There are days where, there's just so much going on, your kids, your family, everything just feels like, how the hell am I going to get through this day and wake up the next day and run whatever time you go run? But you do it anyway. And like that process of consistently doing it, no matter what is going on in your life, that's really the most difficult aspect. Um, but there was this side of me that was like, okay, now I want to prove that I can do more miles. Like I have this idea in my head of this person that I want to become, and I wasn't feeling fully challenged by this calendar club. And I just wanted an opportunity to say without saying the words, but saying it through my actions that like, you audience think this calendar club challenge is hard, but just know that I can do, double what I'm doing right now. Just know, like, just like a call out to peek you into what my brain is actually capable of and my body's actually capable of. And so I just saw it as a month to kind of prove to myself and other people that, you know, I'm not kidding around with the types of things that I'm saying that I'm going to do, you know?
And
So,
I think that's amazing to not just for you, but to prove to yourself what you're like push yourself to what you're capable of doing. Like you know, we talk about like wanting to do hard things, and a lot of in my experience, a lot of people's reaction to that is, well, why?
yeah.
And I always, well, why not? Like everything is a choice, and so I think you're someone says that's crazy, and it's like it's it's crazy, um, sitting around like gaining 100 pounds and binge watching Netflix. That's crazy too.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy to choose. I mean, I even say this to my kids, and actually, so when I first started 75 hard, that weekend I went to Minot, North Dakota with the lacrosse team. They were playing uh two games that weekend, two top 10 teams. One of them was the number 2 team at the time. So Montana State. And I did one of the I'm known to give the rousing halftime speeches and fire up the boys, right? So I talk to them about like everything's hard.
Mm,
Choose your hard, right? It's hard to be lazy. It's hard not to be lazy. It's hard to go run. It's hard to not run and sit around, thinking about what you should have done.
yeah.
And I think it really resonated with some of them around like, hey, adversity is going to show up. Are you going to be prepared for it? Life fights back. And if you're not prepared for that, it's going to be hard than it would be if you just prepared yourself. And when we were playing Montana State, we were down by 2. We battled back. It was a really back and forth game. We won in overtime. Like that was, at halftime, I talked to them about this very thing. That like choose your hard. The next 30 minutes are going to be really hard, regardless. Like which way are you going to choose to make it hard? And then we'll have a long bus ride to figure this out when we got home.
Right.
I had gone for a run that morning out in rural Minot in the corn, literally in the cornfields of Minot, Minnesota, or Minot, North Dakota. And 8-hour bus ride later, we didn't get back until 12 o'clock. I still had a second workout to do.
Mm,
So I worked out at 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday night, Monday morning when I got back, because why not?
yeah.
And how it was like day 5, right? So like I just started this commitment,
Mm,
and like what would I be, how would I feel about myself, all of that, all the speeches I had just given to these
yeah.
young men who then went
Yeah.
out and battled and did exactly what I told them, and I let myself off the hook just because I don't want to do 45-minute workout at the end of my day. So it's more of a commitment to ourselves than we're trying to impress anybody else. It's to stay in alignment, I think, with our morals and how we commit to the best of what we want to become. um, so now, a couple weeks ago, you decided to make a big transition, leaving the company that you've been a part of since you graduated,
Yeah.
and go all in on the endurance running. So our endurance athletes. So talk a little bit about what went into that decision and what you're looking forward to do, and kind of what this mission that you're embarking out on.
Yeah. It's a great question because I'm still working through a lot of that, every day. Um, but at the time, so I worked for a cold brew coffee company, which is a startup. When I first got there, I was the 5th employee there. Now it's well over 50 employees. And, startup life, going to small business, going to kind of like more corporate, um, and like with a sales job or any job where you're setting meetings, you're trying to hit goals. Just because you leave for the day or you clock out, your brain's still ticking. You're still, getting ready for that next day's meeting, getting ready for things that you got to do throughout the week. And I just noticed it was eating up time and energy for me to go after the things that I ultimately want to do, which is do challenges like Calendar Club, which is spend 3 days running from Duluth to St. Paul. And like, like when you say like people ask, why, or they tell you you're crazy. The reason, what I've learned with a lot of people, is because they don't see themselves being able to do that, or they don't identify with that. And so they're creating that distance between you're an outlier, you're doing those things. And like what this kind of full circle moment for me is, yes, why I do this is because I can. But the next step to that is, and you can too. And so it's like this desire for me to want to continue going after big challenges, not with the goal of inspiring people, but with the goal of showing people through my actions that when you go after big goals, you're transformed in the process. No matter if you hit the goal or not, you went after it and you had audacious goals and you put in the work and you put yourself in a position to fail. And I just wanted to show that on a bigger scale, and sort of like you're talking about with your team and giving speeches and then going home and you are confronted with, okay, now your actions meet your words. And I talk about going after big goals. I talk about committing to things that feel most authentic to you and like your path. And I wasn't feeling that in my work. And so I saw as an opportunity to say, hey, I don't feel like this is my path anymore. Um, and so now it's time to take action on it. So, right now I'm building out my YouTube channel, as we talked about earlier. I'm working with a few sponsors that are local to the Twin Cities. And, I'm meeting with some guys at Metro Movers on Friday just to do some manual labor to get paid in the meantime. It's not like I'm allergic to work or don't like it, but just having a job where I can go clock in, do the work and leave all that creative energy for being able to build out running. That's kind of where my focus is right now.
Yeah. So that's it. Because a lot of folks won't so it's an interesting thought, right? So like there's a lot of naysayers when you do your running, when you do your posts, like it must be nice, right? And I remember
Yeah, yeah,
watching,
yeah.
folks be like, yeah, it must be nice that you can, do all that running or do that. And uh and so I assume you'll get some of that same feedback. It must be nice to just be able to, quit your job and go out and and yes, it is, because you've made the commitment. Because I mean, this is just me reflecting on after, hearing you speak for the last half hour or so, Mark, is that you've built up the confidence, capability, and the belief in yourself that like you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you have some sort of like, you know, you know, trust fund you're jumping into. You're just like, I'm gonna figure this out. I can do this. I've done again, you have put deposits in your bank of hard work that have built confidence that you'll figure this out. And so you're taking a bet on yourself and you're jumping in and you're just going to go make it work. Right. And like, I know that all the big transitions I've made in life, when I left my cushy consulting job and joined a two-person startup that like just excited me because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, like I made it work. And then when we got acquired and that culture wasn't a good fit, I jumped and I'm with a different startup and I made it work. And when I wanted to do my own coaching business and speaking, I filed the LLC, $300, filed the LLC paperwork, started a website, and there we go. Right. You take the first step. And that's why I use running as a metaphor all the time, because for me, it's like, well, every long distance starts with the first step. Like you just have to get going. You can't run 100 miles until you run one. And so, do you feel like this is kind of like the ultimate, like all the things you've done in the past have prepared you to do this because it's really just an extension of what you've already accomplished?
It it doesn't always feel as clear as that, but I certainly do believe it. Um, like all the things that I've done over the last 4 years in running, there's no guarantee that it's going to work out. But just as you
Mm,
said, like there's no guarantee that I was going to make it 11 months into this calendar club challenge. There's no guarantee when I set out to do the first charity run that we did that I would complete that and we would meet our fundraising goal, but we figured it out. And I think that's what it's taught me is if you just take the first step, as you're saying, you'll build momentum and you'll find your way in a situation where it's going to work out in the end. And you might have to get real about what that means. Um, but I'm not in this to make $1 million type of thing, you know, like I just want to have a weekend where I can go run and do cool projects and along the way, hopefully inspire people to do that for themselves. But as I'm sure you learned in your running process, it's like it sucks until you start. And then when you get out the door, it becomes a little more doable, even every day, that decision to just get out the door never gets easy. But once you do it, then that momentum starts to build. And I just feel like that's going to happen here in the business side of the running and working with sponsors. I've now taken that step out the door to start my run business wise, to start my business as like an entrepreneur. And now I've already started to see the momentum build from that. And it's still not a guarantee, but I'm 27. I don't have kids. If I fail, there's always going to be a job out there that I can go back to. So,
and a few things there. I've never felt bad after I finished a run. I've never felt worse than when I started. Like, and I've run, almost every day for the last 13 years. And I can't think of one where I was like, man, I regret doing that.
Right. Even
Right.
the
Like
crappy ones.
even the crappy ones, you
Yeah.
feel better because you overcame something, right? It's
Yeah.
like it like and so I feel like it's such a metaphor for life of like, go just take the first step and you won't feel you'll feel better just and like I really believe in like the energy of momentum and creating and getting things going. And to your point, it's funny you mentioned that because I've always, some of these, for the last 10 years, my wife's been a stay-at-home mom. We have 4 kids and she just, re-entered the workforce. But for that whole time, like I was the sole bread earner. And I would just be like, hey, like, there's plenty of jobs. Like I believe enough in myself because of all that I've accomplished. That's like, if it doesn't work out, I'll get something else or I'll
Right.
build it on my own. Like,
Right. Right.
it's, and if you have that and it's not to impress, it's to press upon the point that, we can create way more than we give ourselves credit for. And we all have skills and capabilities. And, you driving around in a van selling people cold brew or, like you could go sell anything, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
so you could go in and say, hey, for X amount of years, I sold, I was successful and I was a startup, blah, blah, blah. It's like the skills are transferable and you can also, and then you're going to stack a whole bunch of new skills on top of whatever you build and what you do and what you do over the last, in the next months and years to come. And then, who knows? And again, uh, you're 27, there's a lot you can, you can have a few bad runs in there and
Yeah. Yeah.
out, right? It's all right. Even though I'm 42, I'll turn 42 in June. I'm like, I tell my wife all the time, like I plan to live well into my hundreds.
Yes.
And so one, I have to work hard now to enable that capability in the future. Two, I have two more life. If I'm 42,
Yeah.
I have two more whole versions of what I've lived to live is the way I see it.
And you
So if
get
I
to
want to
take
live in,
all that experience with you.
yes, yeah, exactly. So it's like I'll stack and stack and stack on top of that for each year, and just like, and it's compounding personal interest.
Yes.
So like when I was in my 20s, like, I'm still putting $1 in, but I'm not seeing the lift. But now there's still $1, but now they're like compounding. And so
Yes.
all that investment compounds, and then just wait till I'm in my 50s, right? So I don't see myself slowing down. I see myself speeding up and being able to have higher leverage over time. And so I really appreciate, your message, your example, what you're putting out there. and even the fun, like, and you're having fun doing it, which I think is what matters most. And it's not that you weren't having fun selling and working at the coffee startups. I'm sure that was fun. Startups are fun, it's great, it's scrappy, it's stressful, but it's
Yeah.
enjoyable. um but to your point, like, it was taking away from the thing that was going to give you the most joy. And
Right.
if you can figure out how to get paid and do what you love and do those things together, like, that unleashes a whole nother level that I think, I have a lot of friends and people that I'm working with actually, and mentoring and coaching, who have found that, they've been late, they worked at like tech startups, big tech startups, got laid off. They put their heart and soul into them for 4 or 5 years, to get laid off in one fell swoop because they missed their numbers.
Right.
And they're like, well, I don't ever want to do that again. So I'm going to build it my own. And I'm working with 6 different entrepreneurs right now who are on that journey, who, like, just like, I don't ever want to put my future in the hands of someone else who doesn't believe in me as much as I believe in me.
Right.
And so there's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of ownership and in managing your own journey. So I recognize and applaud you for that. I think it's a testament to your grit and belief in yourself and what you've built.
Thank you. One thing I'll mention there too, and just like to be even more clear on, like, it was a decision of wanting to uh, go double down on the things that I wanted to do, but it was also a decision where I can no longer do the job that the coffee company was asking me to the best of my ability. So it was also like this, I didn't feel like I could be my best and give the best job to this company. And I feel like that would be unfair for me to continue to work at a place that they're not getting the best out of me either. And so it's like, like, my parents were also like, concerned. They're like, you're getting no income. You'll have no health insurance. You'll have no 401k. Like, yeah, that must be nice to all those people that make those comments who are like, must be nice to quit your job. Well, is it nice to not have an income? But I think it is like, I felt like I could no longer do my job to the best of my ability. And it was at a point where I was like, I can either take time away from running or take time away from the job. And I wanted to double down on this. And one thing you posted very recently was the intensity versus the consistency.
Yeah.
And that's very real for me and I don't think a lot of people recognize that. They see you doing the 100 days of running, uh, and the miles for meaning and the 75 hard, and they see you as like showing up every day and being perfect every day, or me being perfect. It's not like that. I showed up to lifting today, but I might have lifted 5 weights, but I still showed up.
Yeah.
I still built in that habit of showing up, and I lifted 5 more weights than I would have if I just chose to sleep in. And that is like, if that could be a message to anybody listening, that is the most important thing. That it doesn't matter if you have a D or an F day, just don't make it an absent day.
Mm, and I'd add to that, and try not to have it 2 in a row, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't, like,
100%.
show up, and if you underperform today, beat it tomorrow. And even if it's an F day and tomorrow's a D day, just get it up one
That's
little bit,
better.
right?
Yeah.
Just one little bit. And then you build a habit of that. And then, I mean, this, you talked about this earlier, because then also, like, there becomes a time where your B, last year's B turns into this year's D.
Yes.
And so when you raise your standard, you're no longer like that's not good enough, right? And
Right.
so, you talk about this a little bit with the Duluth run that you've done. Like, every year you're becoming a new person. And so you also, I mean, what I love about running is that, like, when I look back through, like, my like Apple uh health history, right? Or like any of the workouts and I've done across the different, MyFitnessPal or Strava, where I'm on now. It's like, you can look back and see this history of, like, the development that you've had and what you've accomplished and who you've become. And, like, and when I go, to your point, like, I work out, um I know, like, was that hard? Like, did I push myself hard enough. It's not, and so you start, I think, evolving into this higher level of holding yourself accountable. So, but not every day is going to be perfect, right? So some days the win is for me to just get out and like, for me, I'll throw on a weighted vest and go for a 45-minute walk because that day, that's my best.
Yeah.
Like, today I did was leg day and I crushed it and I worked out super hard. And so like that was today's and it was a higher, it was closer to a 10. But some days like 3 is all I got. But I'm still gonna give 3, right? As long as it's not 0, like you said. I
Right.
think that's I
Well,
think that's super relevant.
and what's cool about consistency, John, is like you start to learn why you're having D days or F
Mm,
days. You know, if you only show up on the days that you feel like doing it, you never learn like, okay, last night I went to bed at 10:45 and I got 7 hours of sleep instead of 8 or 8.5. And it's like, okay, how about tonight I get the full 8 hours of sleep and I'll probably have a B or an A day tomorrow. Like you start to figure out how you can stack more A's and B's instead of D's and F's. But you need to have those D's and F's through the consistency to learn. That's the biggest thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you got to. I mean, what gets measured gets improved, right? And
Yeah.
so I think when you start plugging into that, you can really move the needle and again figure out how to perform and how to not just show up but show up at your best.
Yes.
Well, man, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like, we could go for another hour. There's so many layers to this, but we'll kind of bring it to a close here. So, where can people find you if they want to follow your journey, on social media or on YouTube? Where's the best place to follow you?
Yeah, the two best places are Instagram and YouTube. That's where I'm kind of putting a lot of attention into, and it's just Mark.Dowdle. And then coming up in April, with it being my last month, I did set this like big goal of accumulating 15,000 miles across anybody who wants to participate in the challenge. So I will be running roughly 500 miles in the month of April alone. And then whether people want to do the full month of Calendar Club or just run a mile every day, or if their equivalent to the Calendar Club for April is running 10 miles in the month, those 10 miles add up to the 15,000. And that's going to be on Strava. And there's a club called Calendar Club 365 Finale. And that's all linked in my bios on my Instagram. So people can find it there. But yeah, just encourage people to get involved and participate.
Awesome. Well, if you like what you heard, follow Mark. I'll put his information in the show notes as well, and also when we post this out, so you can easily find him. And thanks again, Mark. Appreciate it. I know you're going to make impact with not just what you've shared with us in the last 45 minutes or so, but with the journey that you're on and helping I think make the world a better place 1 mile at a time, spreading a great message, and appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you
Thank
for your
you.
time.